Hello, I'm Marian May, and I'm talking about the Live Spirit with Marian May, which is my program for nervous system rebalancing so that more aliveness can be present in your body. And what I want to talk about today is something that a client asked me yesterday. I just want to address some of the confusion that comes up around these things. What we were looking at was a very old pattern of fear that actually came from pre-verbal times for her when she was about 1 year old. And she just asked me afterwards, she says, well, couldn't I just have hypnotherapy and just eliminate this old fearful, this child part from me? And I thought about that afterwards, and I thought this goes back into the the argument between fast and slow that can come up in the therapy world. There are a lot of different styles of treatment, obviously, because this is nothing is a one size fits all perspective. Everyone's developmental history is different. Everyone's pattern of behaving now is a total function of how they've developed throughout their life. So that there is no one answer for what will work for one person will work for everybody. And having experienced myself some of this dilemma with, well, that person over there has had it treated in 2 sessions. Why doesn't that work for me? There can be a lot of almost like stigma and shame, and low self-worth builds up if you're not one of these people for whom the fast techniques work really well. I'm looking at things like this: faster EFT, matrix re-imprinting, rewind techniques. There's all sorts of things for dealing with trauma, supposedly producing miracle solutions in 1 or 2 sessions. EMDR is another one, and I've seen this come out. And I just want to address the sort of like my views on what's going on here. As I just said, one of them is that we just don't know, what your entire history of development is, because this is what we are in the body we're living in now. It's a history machine. It's patterned, it's formed, it's developed connections based entirely on our past experiences. So in that sense, everything we meet and we encounter, we're coming to through the lens of what we've seen and encountered before. So right from the very early ages, and this happens before you're even born, your nervous system is starting to get patterned around your environment. Okay, so I'm just going to borrow an analogy that I saw recently about Brexit, okay, and using Lego. and this analogy kind of refers, I can also relate to the nervous system here. Okay, so Lego, these little plastic building blocks that some people go mad about. So imagine that you've pulled all your Lego in with 20 other people, and you've built a big construction together, and then somebody comes along and says, I want to take all my bricks away again. I don't want them to be part of this big construction that we've all made together. So taking this into the nervous system analogy, it's like, there's lots of building blocks that make up our nervous system, which then kind of links into how we hold ourselves posturally, how our muscles work, how our thoughts work, how our digestion works, how our hormones work. And if you've got a pattern that's been built and reinforced from early on of fear, there are certain things that you know to be really fearful about, but you don't know why. That patterning then kind of can spread and start to attach to more things. So when we're looking at, say, a long-standing fear pattern, it's there right in your nervous system. It's there right in the way your whole body reacts and responds in the moment to what it's meeting. This is faster than thought. This is lightning fast, before a thought can even happen. All right, so meaning making that we've taken out of those experiences in the past, we can deal with the meaning making through the mind, but when it comes to the actual trigger point, where say that the body will suddenly hear, like in this lady's case, she heard a siren and she said it's like she just collapsed inside. So before she'd even really registered, oh, it's a siren, oh, that means X, Y, Z, her body had responded lightningly fast. So what we're looking at with kind of treating this kind of response is if you like, how to repattern this and repattern everything that's been connected to it. It's a little bit like taking a house and saying, well, now we're going to redo the foundations, but we want to keep the whole of the rest of the house intact. It's kind of not going to happen. Now, I do know that, for some people, these faster techniques can work. And I'm thinking that even for some people, some things will work with the faster treatments, and it depends. You see, in my view, it depends how much of the rest of the structure of your being has been formed around that pattern. If it's something that stayed relatively isolated and hasn't really grown into like the sense of like who you are and how your general behavior and attitude is, then yes, you can kind of encapsulate it and possibly collapse that or integrate that traumatic experience more easily than something that's much more foundational. And certainly when we're looking at very early stage repeated patterns of trauma, then we're looking at something that's probably much more foundational. And this just requires a different approach. So this is why I will always start with the idea of safety and containment. And for some people, this is enough, because as this lady said to me, she says, I know that there's nothing in my life now to be afraid of. But she says, but I've just had this anxiety and this foreboding kind of haunting me. She said, I can't understand why. So I said to her, well, how about if you knew that if you got afraid, you'd know how to get yourself back to a sense of safety? And we start there. Because then you don't, the fear of the fear reduces. Because this is what a lot of people get, is they're not so much afraid of something, they're afraid of feeling afraid. Because it is a very uncomfortable feeling in the body, and it does set the mind spinning to try and work out what's going on in the present moment. So there's also the aspect of dual awareness here. It's once you can realize that this is a trigger from the past, it's caused by a memory, it's not about your present day situation, then you can start to look at, okay, so how do I get myself back to a sense of safety from this triggered place? And that's where I teach people how to use these skills for themselves, how to interrupt the pattern at thinking level, how to work with their body to come back into the present moment and into a sense of safety. Because once somebody knows that they can do that and can do it reliably, then their horizons start to expand. Life becomes possible again, because they don't have to be inhibited by this fear, or if I tried that thing, then I might get afraid, and I don't want to have that feeling because I don't know how to deal with it. When you know that you can let yourself become afraid and bring yourself back to safety again, then there's no longer need to be afraid of the fear. So that's always the first level. That's like the foundation, because that's often the piece that was missing from, say, childhood. If you grew up in an environment where the adults around you were always stressed, were always fearful, you never learned how to embody that sense of safety. So as I said, for some people that is enough to just know that they can actually come to a sense of safety in their body now. So the second part of this is then the ability to be in the body during the treatment, the therapy, or the process is a significant aspect. So if you're somebody who dissociates readily or goes into some kind of freeze pattern, then no matter what's going on in the therapy, you're not connected into your body. So your body's kind of like no longer part of the process. It's perfectly possible to go through sessions with lots of visualization. It makes lots of meaning sense. But if the body's not actually connected to the experience, then it doesn't reach it. Okay, so So dissociation and freeze, if you're prone to those things, then I'd suggest these faster techniques are probably not necessarily the ones that are going to work so well for you, because there's that need for the safety and the need to be able to tolerate being in your body with your feelings as they come up, as they move through. Also, the ability to tolerate the repatterning, because if you're used to a certain level of fear, again, you know, thinking about the hormone structure and how that comes off this pattern of fear, and how your baseline level of adrenaline, cortisol, and all the other lovely hormones, you know, they're kind of used to operating at a certain level. So for some people, too much calm too quickly can be really triggering. So to go from, you know, you've been somebody who's been quite sort of anxious and living in quite a high level of fear, to suddenly become very calm can then be very triggering. So that quick repatterning won't hold, because your body goes, no, can't trust this feeling. This doesn't feel right. Let's go back to the pattern we know, the pattern that's already well established through the nervous system, the brain, the hormonal system. So there's a concept called titration in trauma work, which is about being able to, from a place of safety, being able to approach the traumatic feelings, memories, if they're there, but the traumatic bubble, I'd like to say. It's like the traumatic capsule. I think there's this, a lot of time it's talked about as a kind of capsule in the body. But to be able to take a tiny, tiny piece of that and integrate it. So working from the sense of health and safety in your body, to just take a tiny piece and integrate it that doesn't trigger the traumatic response. So it doesn't trip you into dissociation or freeze or even fight flight again. Because once you're in those states, there is no potential for the integration to happen, or it's much less likely. Okay, so titration is these tiny, tiny, tiny steps. Now, again, some people think, oh, but that's going to take forever. How am I ever going to be free of this thing? Because there's so much that I would have to process in tiny, tiny pieces. And again, we're looking at kind of structural patterns in the body here. So if you take enough of a pattern away, it ceases to be a pattern. It cannot anymore hold the structure of that pattern. So I'll use an analogy that I think it's Gary Craig, the founder of EFT, used to use about cutting down trees in the forest. It's like if you cut down enough of the trees, then the rest kind of just implode, they collapse on their own. So it's that kind of idea. You don't have to work on every single little tiny moment where you felt afraid, where you've been abused, where you felt terrified. You just need to titrate carefully into a few of these, and the pattern will then begin to shift. You know, your body's intelligent. It adapts. This is how we get into these states in the first place, through our ability to adapt to our environment. So you start to present yourself with little changes in your environment, your internal environment, and your body will change, and that sense of health and safety will expand and begin to take over the patterns of, I'm not safe, it's a scary world out there, something awful is about to happen to me. Okay, so it was really by keeping the focus on the healthy part, you're able to stay in your body, you're able to connect with that sense of healthy aliveness. That aliveness in you has so much potent power for healing. All right, once that aliveness connects with something that is frozen or otherwise dissociated inside you in this carefully titrated way, it has the power to repattern that old fear pattern, to bring in the healthy pattern that almost is like introducing a virus into a computer system. Only it's a good virus. And it begins to work through the system and goes, oh, once I felt contacted with that sense of that new pattern, that healthy pattern, it can begin to ripple through. So this is why, you know, as I say, I take this kind of more slow approach, because when I began to do this for myself, this is where it really began to really go deeply for me. I'm not saying that, and in no way am I trashing these other quick fixes. If that works for you, brilliant. I'm all in favour of that. But not everything is going to be treated that way, and not everyone can be treated in that way. So when there's something that seems to be a little bit more resistant to those fast techniques, don't lose hope, don't give up. Doesn't mean you're irredeemably broken. It just means there's another way of doing it, another way of approaching it, through this sort of safety upwards, safety up into aliveness approach, okay, which is what my alive spirit is all about, helping to grow that sense of aliveness inside you. And that just, as I said, begins to seep through and repattern all the old frozen parts. So the answer to my client obviously was a little bit longer than something I could give in one sentence. But yes, we don't necessarily want to be just trying to get rid of our youthful development, because that can be just too destabilizing to try and take that much of a foundational pattern away all in one go. All right, so that's it for now. If you want to see more about what I offer, or get in contact with me for any kind of work, or just to talk to me about your state of aliveness and your health and well-being and how that might be improved, do get in touch via my website. So that's marianmay.co.uk. And you'll see there's a contact form on there where you can sign up for a free discovery call where we can have a chat and we can have a conversation about whereabouts would be most appropriate to start working with you, whether you need to build more foundations of safety and containment, or whether you're ready to start growing your sense of aliveness, so to help move you out of stuck places and old patterns. All right, so that's all on my website. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye bye for now.